This is Circus and Changing Realities 2020, a series of virtual dialogues about the future of circus. This panel is a part of CircusTalk's Wake Up Call for Inclusion series. In today's episode, we intend to explore how women of color in the performing arts, specifically in the circus industry, experience life at the intersections of race and gender. I'm your moderator, Veronica Blair. This is Wake Up Call for Inclusion, Episode 3, Institutional Barriers and Individual Bias in the Performing Arts for Women of Color. I'd like to start by introducing you to this amazing panel that I have here. We're going to start off with founder and artistic director of Zacco Dance Theatre, Joanna Highgood. All the way from Australia, mother lovers, we have the music director of Hot Brown Honey, Busty Beatz. Former gymnast, judge of USA Gymnastics, and doctor of physical therapy, Dr. Courtney Johnson. Professional aerialist and dancer, Joanna Diaz. And the two-time world champion, gold medalist in acrobatic gymnastics, USA Gymnastics Hall of Fame member, and World Acrobatic Society inductee and circus performer, Shanae Stiletto. And last but not least, we have the writer, researcher, archaeologist, visiting and lecturer at Yale University and the University of Chicago, Professor Vanessa. During our country's 400 years of slavery, Black people existed as property, counted as livestock along with animals, real people deemed to be of no value, 3/5 of a human to be exact. Bodies only existing to be bought, sold, and traded, donated for medical research and experimentation, even sold into show business. Here in the US, Joice Heth, a slave in her late 70s, was owned by 3 showmen before P.T. Baartman acquired her. He exhibited his property as the 161-year-old mammy of our nation's first president, George Washington. Following her death the following year in 1836, Baartman had a public autopsy of Joyce's body. The price of admission, 50 cents. Born in 1851 and sold into show business at only 10 months old, conjoined twins Millie and Christine McCoy were subjected to constant kidnapping until 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation ended their slave status and they were no longer considered property. Crossed the pond to the United Kingdom. In 1810, a South African woman by the name of Sarah Baartman traveled to England with her employer to be exhibited for money, not knowing that her body would lay down the foundation for scientific racism. I would like to invite Professor Vanessa to give us a brief history of Sarah Baartman and her legacy. Professor Vanessa?
Thank you, everybody, and I'm really delighted to be taking part in this really important discussion. Sarah Baartman was a woman from South Africa who came over to the UK in 1810. The legacy of Sarah Baartman is one of tragedy, exploitation, but it has 3 different legacies. There's her life, a very short life in the UK and in Europe and in Paris, where she was exhibited. She came to England in 1810, 3 years after the Emancipation of Slavery Act of 1807, and it caused quite a controversy, even to the point where there was a court case about how she was doing this of her own consent. And obviously she was exploited to the point in the court case it was set up so she looked like she was giving consent. But it wasn't a popular exhibition because obviously 3 years after the 1807 bill, she went to Paris under a new owner, a new person, a new manager, lots of aspects about whether she was married to this individual. She was abused. She died in 1815 in Paris, but the legacy afterwards is her body was made into a cast, her body was exhibited, her features were used as the kind of foundation for racial anthropology by George Cuvier and other people. And then the representation of her became almost the personification of what was the idea, or what was Black women of color, what was their identity as a sexual being, or the personification of what was this was the identity of how people of color looked and behaved. And then it becomes allied as well into the sexualization of the body of Sarah Baartman and how she's sexually portrayed, and how that sexualization or exaggeration of the buttocks, the genitalia and the features become almost like a means of a caricature of a woman of color. So all those legacies are very difficult to understand. In 2002, her body was taken back to South Africa, given a tribal burial according to the tribe which they believe she was from, and she was met by Nelson Mandela, their body was. And there's been a re-identity of the life and career, if you want to call it a career, of Sarah Baartman in South Africa, where women of colour are trying to take back her identity, and not as a victim, but as something for them. They want to replace colonial names with her name and give her a more positive legacy than what has been given to her through history and later interpretations. Sorry, it sounds like a really horrible story to start this really important discussion with, but I think understanding the historical legacy of her character, who in many ways her career was very brief, but the legacy has overshadowed the entertainment industry on both sides of the Atlantic.
Thank you, Professor Vanessa. Fast forward to today. Fast forward to right now. Fast forward to the women that you see on the screen in front of you. The personification of exploitation of Sarah Baartman's body paved the way, opened the door, gave the opportunity for years and years of a false narrative about Black women, about women of color's bodies. Even today, in the training spaces, whether it's in circus institutions, gymnastic institutions, dance institutions, the narratives on the bodies of women of color is that we are not born with the right bodies to form the elegant lines required for classical dance. We are traditionally seen as too muscular, too athletic, or too curvy, AKA too sexy. Our hair, weird, or even comical. It's a harsh truth, it's a harsh reality, but we start our conversation here. And my first question to our panel today is, how has your body been perceived in the circus world and in the competition world? I'd like to start this off with Shanae Stiletto.
Thank you so much, Veronica, and thank you so much for having me. And to speak on that, starting with my acrobatic competitive career, as a little girl, I was told that I could not dance, that I was not graceful by my coaches, that I also too would never become a world champion as a little Black girl. I was told that by my former abuser and coach, David Rickbaum. I was also told that I wasn't flexible enough to do well in acrobatic gymnastics, and that I was told that my presence on the competitive floor was overtly sexual as a little girl in acrobatic gymnastics. And I was put in a leotard by one of my really great coaches. His name is Yuri Vorobiev, and he designed it. And the costume was deemed inappropriate and offensive on my little Black body and was subsequently banned. You were no longer allowed to wear that type of leotard in the sport for a few years. And the judges made an effort to let my coaches know that I would be artistically deducted for my overtly sexual presence on the competition floor as a little girl. Fast forward to when I'm a circus performer now. I have been questioned, how do I express my femininity and my sensuality on stage, because I do not look like a woman, because I am so athletic. I've been told that I look so muscular and that I look so masculine, that it must be very difficult for me to find a level of femininity to express myself on the stage. I've been told that by different circus artists, and I've been asked that over and over again. Also, most recently, my experience when I was in Verikai, I was the first promise in Verikai. That's one of the main characters. It's a solo hand balancing role. And I was the first woman of color to do that role. I was told that I wasn't really the right look, that the role wasn't really me, that I was stiff, that I didn't have enough presence on stage, that I ultimately did not have the caliber. The costuming was not fitted appropriately for me. It was all done very quickly, but there was no accommodations at Cirque du Soleil that were fitting for me to do that role. The makeup was not adapted properly. It was later used against me when I was partaking in the role by the artistic director. He told me that I was underperforming because the makeup was not adapted properly to my dark skin. And the artistic director also told me that my presence on stage was offensive. And that I was overtly sexual for just existing on stage, trying to imbibe the character of the promise, one of my dreams that I'd had for just years. And I eventually went on to file HR complaints against Cirque du Soleil, to, of course, a completely all-white HR department. I filed with the EEOC in Los Angeles for racial bias and discrimination. I was told that I did have a case, but that racial discrimination within the arts is the most difficult thing to prove, and that it really just comes down to creative opinion, and that anything that any of the directors said, or any of the choreographers, or anybody that was entrusted with my care on stage, it was just their creative opinion and their professional opinion, for example, of me not being able to live up to that role in my Black body.
So even as a two-time world champion, gold medalist in acrobatic gymnastics, there was still always a way somehow to, for lack of a better term, put you in your place and let you know that no matter how much you have achieved, you are still too muscular, not elegant, not beautiful. My next question is for everyone. With this narrative, this unspoken narrative about our bodies, we have to come into the room. We come into the training space at a disadvantage, so to speak. It's not a real one. It's not based in reality. It's in the minds and the thoughts and the eyes of the coaches that have their eyes on our bodies. So we already come in with the energy, with the thought that we have to be better than, that we have to show improve. And as we show improve and we defy expectations, the expectations that are put on us, how does that affect your psyche? How has that affect your ability to be the performer that you know that you can be, or that you desire to be? Anyone can take that.
Well, I would just say that, it's really exhausting. And sometimes it can be emotionally debilitating. I think this has been, just as we've been hearing from Professor Vanessa, these are realities that have shaped our experience for forever. I mean, for many, 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 many years. So, yeah, I just think, it pulls at our confidence. It pulls at our commitment. I think lots of people actually give up really early, really talented people, which is extremely unfortunate. And I think that it, just in the larger context of our social structures and our social behaviors, it really does erode at our spirit and our not just our confidence in ourselves, but our image of ourselves. I think some people come to believe that these images or these ideas are actually true. That perhaps I really am not beautiful. Perhaps this really is that these standards, you know, which is basically, you know, based on the white body, maybe that is true. And we, you know, I mean, we see that evidenced in lightning creams and all kinds of things where we're trying to emulate or transform ourselves, you know, and I'll just say transform our exquisite, beautiful Black bodies into something that we're not. But I do feel like there has been, and there continues to be a movement to really push against that in our own communities. You know, Black joy, Black beauty, Black pride has been really important, and has been really, I think, I don't want to use the word, I'm just thinking like aggressively pushed in our communities. I don't want to use that word, but that has been actively embraced by a lot of our communities in leadership and in the arts and so on. So I feel like we're at this turning point, especially right now with all that's going on, that you know, some of these things can be turned around and hopefully permanently.
Yes. Thank you, Joanna.
Oops.
It can be easily perceived as, what is it? As a young woman in a training space where there is no others like you, it can be easy to get confused about what is beautiful and what is acceptable, especially if you don't see it around you. And what's even more tough for a young woman in that situation is the idea of that her body, her very being, her smile, maybe her hair even, maybe the sway in her back or the pronation of her feet may be deemed inappropriate or not beautiful enough for the sport or for the artistic form that she may be practicing. I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of the Eurocentric line and how it is present in a lot of performance arts institutions and competitive gymnastics and competitive sports, rather. And I want to talk about this idea of toe shaming, toe point shaming, and body shaming, the shaming of anybody that doesn't fit the Eurocentric line. I'd like to open this up to Dr. Johnson.
Okay, well, I will start just by giving a little bit of my experience in gymnastics, because I definitely was toe shamed. I mean, my coaches, specifically one coach, one of my Russian coaches, would literally, like, I would sit at the edge of the floor with my feet, like my heels kind of hanging off of the mat, and he would try to force my feet down. I mean, he was always like hitting my feet anytime I would do something, hitting my feet, trying to, like, I almost was like, my feet are gonna break. Like, we can't do that. Like, my feet just don't do that. And it was always a problem. So that always was in the back of my head too. When competing, I was always like, okay, like, I'm gonna get taken off for my toe point. It's just inevitable. I'm never gonna be able to get, you know, this type of a score. I'm never gonna be able to do this because of this. And I was told that a lot. And I remember even a different coach kind of telling me, one meet I remember on bars, and she was saying, yeah, you know, it was one of the highest scores I'd ever gotten. I'd won first place at this meet, and I was like, okay, so maybe it's not just all about my toe point, you know? And my coach just then says, well, you just, you know, you're going really fast. You just have a lot of power. They can't even see your feet. So they probably just didn't even notice how your feet looked. I was like, okay, like, that's really, you know, it was hard to just to think like, okay, I tried really hard. I'm trying extra hard because I know my feet don't point correctly. And then, you know, I come into this meet, I do very well. And It was just, oh, you just can't even see your feet. If they could see them, they would take off for it. So that was always kind of, I mean, it was pretty bad for my confidence, I would say then. And I remember that I was like 9 or 10. So thinking about like future gymnastics, it's kind of like, oh, I don't know that I'll be able to do it because my feet don't point, or, and now that I think, as a physical therapist and having studied the body and studied anatomy, one thing that my coaches would say, it's like, okay, well, you're really powerful when it comes to tumbling, vaulting, stuff like that. And one of those things is the stiffness in the feet. So it's something that like that should have kind of been played up a little bit more, I think. And when I see girls today that I work with, I'm just like, okay, I know you want your toe point to be, this way. It doesn't have to be this way. Your toes are pointed. I'm a judge. We can see that your toes are pointed. But the stiffness that your coaches are ignoring, this is going to help you be more powerful, just naturally more powerful. And we can work on those strengths. So it's definitely, now I kind of wish that I had someone to tell me those things, but it's definitely something that I like to, share with the girls that I treat or that I coach now. So they don't just hear that negative about, how their feet look.
So would it be safe to say that it's more of a, like, the way the techniques that coaches use for training needs to be updated a bit to be able to train and work with everybody?
Yeah, I think so. And I in some of the talks that I do, I kind of try to make sure, like, okay, we have to look at the individual. Everybody is different. Every person's body is different, but there are things that we can look at that can be highlighted, or things that we can work on to kind of enhance, to use those natural strengths they already have. And then, it's a much more positive way of coaching. And I think it helps young girls, I should say, boys too, to succeed. And they have a lot more confidence when they're going to perform or compete.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, Joanna Diaz.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. Haven't talked yet, been quiet. So at National Center for Circus Arts, I've been told that splits were audience pleaser. And that if I didn't get my splits or my points ready, I wouldn't be able to work. I wouldn't be in business. And I gladly can say that my teachers told me that I should just try to improve my strength and flexibility and try to be as creative as I could. But the common word was that, a non-aerocentric line wouldn't be on stage. And that was said to me just before I graduated, actually. Just like a few months before I graduated, I heard from another aerialist, they just only want white, blonde, skinny, like balletic lines. So they don't want brunettes. And I was just thinking, what about me? What about me? I'm about to graduate from this. And just for you to understand, I come as well. I didn't start circus when I was a child. I started ballroom dance in Portugal, where I'm from. And there as well, I was called too African, too Black. I shouldn't be there. And like all of my lines weren't supposed to be like that. And it's like a Latin dance. So then I thought, moving to circus, I thought this art form would be more acceptable for who I am, and not trying to change me, not trying to relax my curls all the time. And I'm a proof living that you can be successful. I live in London. I work in London with different companies. So, and I didn't get those flat lines. I'm not saying that you need you don't need to get them, but I'm just saying that, like, you can flex your feet and then you can point. So it elongates the line in terms of visual, that what you want to see on stage. You can work with that, but not trying to break your body and trying to be someone that you aren't. Embrace what you have in your body. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. That also reminds me of Professor Vanessa, when before the panel started, we were talking about Miss Lala and the perception of Miss Lala. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about Miss Lala?
Miss Lala is probably the most famous circus painting done by Degas in 1879. Do you know it? It's the most beautiful, stunning painting of an aerialist in a circus in Paris. It has Miss Olga Brown, which was her name, was probably one of the most successful women of color, Black performers of the 19th century. There was a lot more histories of Black performers, which I've written about, which Veronica knows, which people don't know about. And it's a really complex and problematic, but equally fascinating history. And it's always part of the cultural ecology of the performance as well. But Miss Lala is fascinating because the representations of her in posters and other images at the time portray, again, this kind of colonial representation, but also this representation of large buttocks and lips, very much going back to Sarah Baartman, but Degas doesn't. Degas portrays her in such a beautiful way that for a lot of people who look at it, they don't realize she's a woman of color. Presented as a woman of color. When I worked with a group of young women of color circus performers 2 years ago, when I did a show based on Miss Lala, they didn't realize she was a woman of color. So in a way, it's almost like, did Degas kind of make her a lot lighter to show that she wasn't Black? Or is that how art curators over the last 100 years have presented that? Because to me, the inspiration for me to show aspects of circus history I wanted to show was a woman at the center of the performance, a venue that was not a big top and a racial characteristic, a Black woman in the middle of a building to show everything that circus was and people don't realize still is, from the narrative of what traditional circus is. And I was arguing in the 19th century, aspects of it in Britain and Europe were not like that. And why have we lost that history? But Miss Lala's body, portrayed by Degas, is beautiful. Has it been whitewashed? Or was she represented in different ways? I seek you to look at the image. There's about 12 different versions of it, and it's fascinating how her body and her face changes and how he represents her.
Wow. Thank you very, very much, Professor Vanessa. It's it's ever apparent, the images of Black women and Black women's bodies, and how we are given clues and told in large ways, such as the lightening of Miss Lala's skin in a portrait, all the way down to the tiny, tiny things that us millennials call microaggressions, that we hear all the time, and yet no one can really figure out what they are, right? Micro behaviors or statements that don't necessarily reflect malicious intent, which nonetheless can inflict insult or injury. They are also known as death by 1,000 cuts. Some microaggressions a female artists of color may typically encounter would be, "You are beautiful for a Black, brown, Asian woman," or "You are the most beautiful fill in the blank I've ever seen." "You are so aggressive," or "You are not like the others. You are better than them." I would like to invite our panel to share some microaggressions that stick out in your mind. In no particular order.
Yes, I'm in here because "Don't Touch My Hair" is one of the major ones I have experienced across the world. I mean, in Hot Brown Honey, we've got a song. We do it in 4 different genres saying, "Do not touch my hair." So, you know, that is just like, come on, like, stop invading my space. You know, and that is just, and that we found that, like, I mean, we're writing this from this perspective, from the global south, and then we head to other parts of the world and we're like, we have Black women going, yes, yes. You know, and just also to acknowledge, I just want to acknowledge the depth of this conversation. It is very, like, you know, there's, I can feel it through the Zoom as well, that there, you know, that there is some pain in hearing some of those stories, like from the past, but there is also this, like, level of, like, you know, not only did we survive, but, like, as they say, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams right here, looking right here, you know. Yeah. So microaggressions, yeah, they are continual, and it is like that, the paper cuts thing. I'm like, man, I mean, how many times can you say the same thing and people still do it?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who's up next?
Well, in my experience with microaggressions, I've heard many times, because I'm biracial, I've heard, you're so lucky because you are not fully Black, and so that must be why you're so beautiful. I've been questioned by my commercial agents here in Hollywood and in other places in the world, that am I really biracial because I'm so dark, for a biracial person, and that I must be lying about being biracial or mixed European heritage. And I've been told as well that I am very lucky that I'm not so dark, because then my opportunities wouldn't be as numerous as they have been within the circus world and as an artist. And so it's somewhat of a privilege to not be as dark as I could be.
Mm. Go for it, Joanna.
Relate to Ben. Yeah, I have this one. It's really fun. Oh, I just saw you doing rope. Oh, you were amazing. Oh my God, I've seen you in this show. Oh my God. So I don't do rope. It's the aerial that I don't do. So I've heard this from peers, like from colleagues, from students, from studios that I teach, from bookers, from everyone, that I was the same person as my dear friend that is a rope artist, and we never heard of each other. And then actually the first thing that we did was, like, when we saw each other, we started laughing and we just hugged each other, because we were like, we are confused all the time. I'm Joanna all the time, and you are, all the time. And in a way, like, that's funny, because I'm so flattered by being compared to her, because she's high level professional. But in another way, it's like, come on, I've been putting all my creativity, like I put my voice artistically in my work on the hoop. It's like my main thing. And you're just saying that you saw me in this show. It's completely like, we don't look alike. Just our skin look alike. Even the hair is different. Like, come on, like, it's quite tiring, but that's fun.
Thanks. Anyone else? Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, so I can definitely relate to both of those, which people would just, also tell me, like, oh, well, you're just so, you're very well, do well at gymnastics, and you're just very beautiful, but like you can't fully be Black, right? And I'm like, okay, well, my mom's Black and my dad's Black, so that's what I am. Like, it shouldn't matter. You should just stop at, you do very well in gymnastics. Okay, you're beautiful. That's it. But I think one thing, and I don't know if this can be considered like a microaggression, but I remember when I first started competing, I was young. I mean, I think I was 9 when my coaches told me this, but they were like, okay, when we go to some of these meets, you just might not get the scores you deserve because of the way you look. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? Like, and then again, I'm like, is it my toe point again? Like, that's what it is. I'm like, no, it's just, because of the way you're looking, because you're Black, you might not get the scores you deserve when we go to some of these competitions. And I'm like, really? Okay. I just kind of remember thinking like, all right, well, now I have to make sure I try extra hard. Like, there can be no room for discussion. I'm going to do, everything that I can. It's going to be perfect. And I think that kind of just perpetuated this like perfectionism that I kind of had in gymnastics. I was very literal when it came to things, and my coaches would say, okay, you have to stick 10 in a row. If you miss one, you have to start over. And I would be in the gym for like an extra 2 hours if I didn't do it perfectly, because I was just like, I just don't want there to be any room for discussion, because I mean, it's just not fair. I can't help the way I look. So, I don't want that to be something that hinders me, So that was one thing I thought about. And that's one of the reasons why I judge gymnastics now. And it's just so that other young women of color and girls of color can just see someone that is an official that looks like them. And of course, I didn't see that growing up. So I'm like, okay, I want to be there. And just so they see, yes, you can be a judge. There are judges here that look like you. And hopefully coaches aren't still saying, okay, you're not going to get the scores you deserve when we go to certain areas.
Yes. And nevertheless, she persisted. As Busty mentioned, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And we transcend our past, we transcend our ancestors, and we stand on the foundation that they have built for us, and we are here. In recent years, we have finally had the triumph of the ballet shoe, the point shoes, tights and undergarments. Basic necessities are now being produced in colors other than ballet pink, nude, and suntan. They now have names like mocha, caramel, and dark velvet. So just to paint a picture of what it was like before this big triumph for women of color. Typically, if you were a darker skinned artist in the circus or in the dance world, you would have to dye your tights in the washing machine with dye from Walmart or Target or Woolworths. Or if you were a ballerina, you would have to paint your point shoes with foundation, a practice known as pancaking, which basically cost a bit more extra money, because you had to not only buy your point shoes, but you had to buy bottles of foundation and take your time and paint in your shoes so that they matched your skin color. We no longer have to do those things. And it is with lots of protesting and petitions and years of asking and years of letter writing that we finally have this triumph. And I, for one, am so happy that I can go into a Capezio and buy something off the rack and give it a wash, shake it out, and put it right onto my body. It is really, really, really exciting for me personally. But I want to open this up to the panelists, and I want to ask, what does this triumph mean for the future of Black, Indigenous, people of color performers? Joanna, do you want to start us off?
Yes. please. I think that's that's a lot. It's a big achievement for me as a adult woman of color, but also it's for me, Joanna, a child, because really in Portugal I did not see myself represented at all, no in television, no in the dance ballroom, and in school actually you would have the skin color as only one. So that also made me feel like I'm always different. All my life, it's been like 31 years of being different. And that is just a celebration of my skin. I don't need to go and bare legs anymore. I can use those tights that make me feel that I matter as well, make me be included in something. And for the generations to come, it's amazing because they feel empowered to do whatever they want to, to put the makeup that they want to.
Joanna Higood, the other Joanna, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry, I was blinking back and forth with my camera. I'm still trying to figure out the technology. Well, I would just say that, I had actually more foundation for my shoes than I actually ever had for my face. So it's just like, hallelujah, yay, even though I've long retired any shoes. But I want to say that I think that I wouldn't necessarily call this a triumph. I mean, I would call it like it's a step. And there's been a precedent for this for years with Dance Theater of Harlem. Arthur Mitchell decided that he was going to introduce brown tights and shoes to his dancers after seeing one of his dancers wearing brown tights over her pink ones, because she kept feeling like this was Lanchi Stevenson, that her upper body was not matching her lower body, and rightfully so, and that she couldn't achieve or create and craft those line extensions that are so, foundational to the ballet aesthetic. So he decided to make that a standard, and everything had to be done in-house. They dyed everything and painted everything in-house because nobody was producing this. And this is, if I hadn't mentioned it already, this was in the early 70s. So why has it taken so long? Why did it take till like 2018, for somebody to finally start manufacturing products or dancewear for, for brown and black bodies and people of color? That really speaks volumes to how our bodies are valued within this field. And just these stories, which are absolutely heartbreaking and energizing, really say and speak to that point, right? So, so anyway, so I think it's definitely a convenience. We're not spending all this time and money again, and I also feel like it's a great statement, or it's a statement about the idea of inclusion. That I think that it gives dancers a much better confidence, as Joanna was saying. Feeling as if, in general, that you are a part of an art form that you really, really love, and I think that's super important. But it really is, this whole issue is about how a dancer is presented on stage or in the training situation. It says nothing about the presence of dancers of color within the field, and specifically in ballet. People of color, and particularly African-American dancers, are very underrepresented in the field, and particularly in the context of major ballet companies. And it's not because there are not amazing dancers. I mean, phenomenal, outstanding, top tier, as we've been just even hearing among these panelists, world champion, and yet you're not good enough, right? So all of these dancers are moving off to other countries, to get work. Like somebody like Michaela DePrince, You're like, why does she have to go to Europe to actually get a good contract? I mean, it's like unbelievable, right? So, you know, the ballet aesthetic is traditionally based on the characteristics of a white body. You know, that it's that is, as we spoke about earlier, that is the standard of beauty. And we've been rejected because we don't conform. You know, we don't necessarily conform to those aesthetics either in our shapes or in our color. And that is the reason, right? And so from an African American perspective, Misty Copeland is the first African American female principal dancer at American Ballet Theater in 2015. Now this is within a 75-year history, and this is almost 50 years after the civil rights movement ended, right? So with all this, you know, big confetti drops, you know, it's like, we're so great, we're doing this. I mean, for me, it's like, shouldn't you be embarrassed? I mean, it's like, why are we celebrating? This is not good, you know? And she's the only African-American principal dancer there now, okay? San Francisco Ballet, 0 Black principal dancers. You know, I think New York City Ballet has 1. And back to that whole thing of, you know, what, even when you achieve, you know, Misty Copeland mentions in her biography that she was asked to lighten her skin to play a role when she was in the court of ballet, you know. So these things, you know, it's astounding. So, you know, that this is still happening. But anyway, you know, under a lot of pressure, and particularly right now, there's a tremendous amount of pressure. There's equity projects going on, so people are in conversation. They're actively trying to figure out ways to break some of these, you know, codes and break some of these traditions, which I really respect. So I feel like the shoes and the tights are great, but they mean nothing if you don't have a job. You know, they mean nothing really. So I think the triumph will come when the ballet world realizes that this technique is a vehicle for higher forms of artistic expression and communication, and that it does not have to be practiced by only one body type or one, you know, one aesthetic here of a body, in order to be legitimate and beautiful. You know, that to me will be the triumph. And it'll be great, so we can shop and get our things when we need to without any trouble.
Veronica, can I throw a historical?
In the world of convenience, Joanna. Hi, good.
Yes. No, go ahead, Professor Vanessa. You wanted to say something?
I just want to throw a really historical wobble into this. That 100 years ago, when Black culture was more segregated, but you had this incredible, vibrant aspect, especially in America, in the kind of variety of vaudeville entertainment, you could get clothes designed for the Black body, you could get tights, you could get, so in a way, as Black culture became appropriated and marginalized, but then put in the central, all those things that were there 100 years ago have been lost as well. So you could get dry cleaners, everything was set up for the Black body within Black variety and Black vaudeville performance in America, and that's all gone.
Yes, and there was thriving Black businesses.
Thriving Black businesses. You only have to go through and you'll actually see where it was literally, and people like Siegfried Follies and people like that stole a lot of those ideas and that aspect away from it, but they didn't bring the people who actually did the work. So it's another form of appropriation is what I'm saying. That skill and that ability. So 100 years ago, you could go into the shops of Harlem, or you could go into specialist variety vaudeville show business shops and get things. But now you can't, or it's taken 100 years to get it back. So I find that interesting as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just a bit of a historical geek in a way, because, you know, I always find that things that we think are new, it's actually been lost. A lot lost, and a lot of things that I find really fascinating is uncovering stories of all different aspects of circus history. For me in particular, is actually one of the most complicated things, because it's Circus to America is America, but where else is not. So a lot of the presumptions and ideas, and also the same misinterpretations of, I would say, it's universal, the way women's body are treated in circus for a long time, and the black body is even more extreme, universal. But different traditions look at it in different ways. So when you say in Europe, a lot of European scholars, Afro-European scholars, would say that the black Afro-American body was then become colonialized and fetishized in a different way in Europe. So issues that you have to throw back as well. So it's a complex issue, but I think I'm very honored to be part of this, and I'm sorry if I come across as a bit of a historical geek, but sometimes it just makes me angry that 2018 was the first time some of my young students could get shoes to match their skin color, but you could get it 100 years ago.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Professor Vanessa.
And I would just like to add to that as well, if I could. I wanted to say, and I know that there's a lot of progress being made around this issue, obviously in the Western world, but I do feel like we don't speak enough about the broader, in Europe and in Asia, about just how far back they really are. My last job that I worked in China, in Macau, they really only asked for white artists to come there. I was just there the other year. I was there for almost a year. I was put in a white performer's costume, and they refused to change it. And they did that in an effort to diffuse my blackness throughout that entire contract. They told me from the beginning, once I got there, that even though all the white performers would be staying there long term, that I would be expected to take a shorter contract and that I shouldn't expect to stay there very long. I also was not requested as much as the other white performers within that show and within the Venetian Macau casino, because they take on clients' requests for white performers only. And this is recent. This is just within like the last year. So as much as I love to hear these conversations about Western circus, about Western gymnastics doing so much better and voices being uplifted, things being more accessible, when I go into these spaces, which is normally not in America, they're so far behind in terms of raising the bar for representation, for accessibility, for costuming. And I would like to say that a wardrobe person of color put me in that white performer's costume and refused to change it. And I looked ridiculous. And every single day people said things to me on stage. Why are you in that costume? That's obviously for a white girl. It was completely nude from head to toe. So it wasn't all of these different colors. It was just completely pink and white nude. And, and it was highly embarrassing. And it was very difficult to perform every single day. And so I just also want to just reinforce the fact that in our spaces, in these Western spaces, we do have certain levels of privilege where things are so much better, the conversations are so broad, but it's so blatant in other parts of the world, especially in Asia. And there's so much work for circus performers there. That's where so much opportunity is happening. That's where a lot of big companies like Cirque, they all want to put roots there. Of course, they're starting to put roots in Africa as well, but they're putting a lot of roots in Asia. There's a huge demographic there. There's a large source of audiences there. And so how do we deal with that? Because even though there are these triumphs, which we say are so long overdue, in the acrobatic gymnastics world, all the gymnasts there, I just have been speaking to them all recently, they're all feeling the same strain. They feel the same lack of representation. They feel like they're still being, deducted for how they look. And they're saying the things that I was saying 20 years ago when I was competing. So I'm still hearing a lot of these same narratives, even if we're making these triumphs, because a lot of these costume companies still tell them, well, we don't want to make something for you, because if we have to resell that costume, we know that we're probably going to sell it to a white acrobat, white gymnast. And we don't want to waste the money because it most likely won't go to a black gymnast or black acrobat. So even still, I feel like there is a lot of limitation. I don't like to get ahead of myself and do too much celebrating, because my experience in the world doing contracts all over in all these different countries is not like that. I go in as the only black body. I'm the only black performer. I want to see that change. I don't like the fact that there's never anyone else there that looks like me. And these are modern, cool contracts that we're all doing, but we're only allowed to go into them one or maybe two at a time if we're lucky. So I just wanted to add that to that.
I think it's a great time to segue into my next question. Is it more important for Black artists and artists of color to create their respective spaces, like own their own shows or companies, or contribute to make strides for greater inclusion in established companies. I would want to shoot this one over to Busty.
Yeah, I've well, over the last little bit of time too, things have been just clarifying a lot. I'm like, we have been living, we have a history of white supremacy and colonization, you know, throughout the world. So there are, you know, having worked in parts of Asia as well and in Africa, I'm like, this is all colonized minds. Everyone decolonize, because we're still there going, the ideal is white. You know, the ideal is this European standard, which sometimes I'm like, I don't know if that's excellent. I don't know if that's excellent art. Like, you know, in Australia, they love doing the ballet. They love doing opera. I'm like, why do a half-assed version? Go to Vienna if you want to see the opera. Like, you know, it's really like, yeah, but it is, I've just, and seeing so many people speak out as well around the world, I'm like, these institutions were never made for us. They never expected us to be like coming and knocking on the door, you know. And I know for myself, I've been turned away, and for Hot Brown Honey, we've been turned away numerous times. And that's why we went, nah, not really interested in being rejected by something that doesn't accept us in the first place. You know, it's and it's hard because we've all done the jobs, like, you know, and gone into those spaces and gone, yep, we're just gonna bite down. But of late, like, and having this time over this isolation and quarantine period and into, like, you know, this huge global movement of Black Lives Matter, it's just really apparent that the trauma that is a part of going into those institutions is no longer worth it to me. I don't want anything to actually do with them when I know that there are amazing Black companies around the world who have made these pathways and who are doing incredible work that is next level, work that is like speaking to, you know, other ways of thinking, other ways of being. So I'm just like, yeah, nah, all of y'all are on my white list. I don't want nothing to do with you no more. These are the companies and these are the artists and these are the people that I will now and forever be feeding my love into. Yeah.
Joanna Highgood, do you want to add to that?
Well, I have similar feelings, and yet I feel like people should be able to do and be in the places where they feel like they can excel and where they feel that their spirits are going to thrive and reach to whatever those outer limits of our creativity and our joy is. I mean, right now, I mean, problematically, of course, you know, most of the money is being funneled towards white institutions, right? So I think we got to shift that around too, and everybody has to get busy in kind of cleaning up their own houses and addressing some of the issues and the problems that we've been speaking about today. I don't know, you know, it's like this is kind of this has been the great debate for a long time too, you know. Do we stay separate or do we integrate? I mean, these are very, very old conversations that, you know, go back to Reconstruction. So I don't know. I think people, as I said, it's like, I think we have to change our mindset about what our potentials are and how we go about reaching for what we believe in and the values that we believe in. And I think that can come in so many different forms. So, but right now, I'm with Busty at the moment. It's like I feel, well, you know, I've been making, my work is so focused around our Black stories, you know, so that's important to me because I'm trying to, one, you know, participate and be a good, an active citizen, and to be in a conversation that I hope will change, you know, help change our lives, you know, so I'm not, that commitment I don't think will change, and probably not in this lifetime. And also just thinking like this is such a long-term thing. This is like, we're talking way beyond our, you know, our own lifetimes at this point. But I mean, just laying this foundation, or being part of laying down the foundation for equity and for peaceful and productive relationships, meaningful relationships with the other human animals on the planet, feels so important. How we get there, I think, is still, there's many different types of opportunities.
If anybody would like to share, I would be curious to know how you would like to ideally present yourself on stage if there weren't any if it weren't the contract in Asia, or the contract where you have to wear the pre-made costume that is not your skin tone or abide by rules. I would really like to open it up and hear maybe from Joanna Diaz, how would you ideally like to present yourself on stage as Joanna Diaz?
I would like to avoid that feeling just before going on stage that the presenter of the compare is saying, and white and black indigenous body, instead of saying Joanna Diaz. For God's sake, I don't want to be a token. That's basically what I want to say. I don't want to just be the only one having my shoulders histories of all of my colleagues that I know that are also Black or people of color. I don't want to have all the time that responsibility to not fail because you are representing their story too. I want to have my colleagues all on stage with white, with people of color. I want us to be like connected. So in that case, like, I don't want to be just myself with my race all the time, me being different all the time, because circus, yes, is about togetherness, it's about uniqueness, but it's not about just race. It's not just about heritage. So yeah, I want to be on stage and be magical, create work, connect with others, but don't be this object that represents only one thing. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Shanae, it looked like you wanted to add something to that.
Yes, I think that I wanted to add something similar, where I would like to feel the protection going into these spaces to be able to fully embody the role that I've been given, because I've gotten the opportunity to play the roles that we all want to play, and we've seen how it's turned out. How you end up getting treated and laughed out of there and thrown out of there. And you know, how even if you've got the job, it still does not matter. So what I would like to see in terms of moving forward, in terms of protection for all of us, for me, it comes down to law, because before you can change the hearts and minds of people, you do it with laws. Laws have a very interesting and funny way of changing the hearts and minds of people, okay? And I saw this with UC Gymnastics, dealing with the abuse problem there. They wanted to police themselves. They said, we don't need Congress, we don't need laws. We are going to mandate, we are going to control this child abuse problem ourselves. We don't need you to step in, right? And so that's what these companies want. They want to continue to police themselves, to be onto a universe unto themselves, and so that they can control all of this. And so for me, moving forward, I feel like there needs to be international mandates for circus performers, for BIPOC performers. It needs to go very deep, because people aren't going to do it always on their own. And if you're inviting us into these spaces, where are the councils, that are going to come in to protect us as well? When they start to make these new policies, who's going to police the policies? It comes back to, say, gymnastics. They say, we want to make our own policies. They say, but who's going to enforce and police those policies if not for the FBI, if not for Congress, if not for local law, if not for federal legislation? We need to have more boots on the ground, and we need to have ears and eyes that are BIPOC in all of these circus performing arts spaces that look like us, that protect us, that speak for us, that sound like us, and that are going to actually be given a real seat at the table and be given actual power in these spaces, so that they're not just there in theory, that they're not just there in representation or just to have the look. But it would feel very different if you knew that there were allies there that were actually on payroll and that were actually being able to institute real laws. I mean, I think it's very important to know your rights when you go into certain spaces. And I see so many performers that don't know their rights. I didn't even know that I could file with the EEOC for the longest time. I didn't even know I had the right to do that against Cirque du Soleil. And I was only lucky enough to be able to do that because I toured at that time in America and in Canada, which was very unique because I don't normally work for Cirque before that in America. And that was the only reason why I was able to do that. But nobody wanted me to know that. Nobody wanted me to know that I had access, that I could actually fight for myself on an actual legislative role. So it's not just about these art spaces opening up, because there's so much that goes into that, that you need in terms of actual protection and oversight and accountability for people that are directors, artistic directors, creative directors, agents, scouts, and those need to be mandated. And yes, they need to be policed just as we have been policed and continue to be policed every single day on the streets of America as Black and brown bodies killed in our own homes, sleeping like Breonna Taylor, who we're still fighting to have justice for her. So, yes.
Yes.
Shanae for president.
Shanae for president. So, looking at all these beautiful faces on my screen, I would like to know what your future in the performing arts looks like. What are your hopes? What do you plan to do? Maybe how you're going to do it.
Well, I think Courtney was going to answer that, so I'll let Courtney go first.
I'll go. Unfortunately, I do have to leave in a few minutes. I'm sorry. But I just wanted to say, for me, since I don't plan to be performing anytime soon, I think those days are over. However, just as not just a medical professional, but a judge, and then just working with a lot of women of color, because I'm in the U.S. a part of the Brown Girls Do Gymnastics organization. So what my goal is just to help to empower younger women of color to see that, there is a place for you. You can do these things. You don't have to conform. I hope in the future that things are more accepted, but like others have mentioned, there are lots of, companies that, want people of color, and there's already a lot of, organizations like that. So I just want to be able to, show girls, this is, not to be ashamed of their body too. And that here, the things that you can do, that with the things you naturally have, here's how we can play up these strengths. This is you. You don't have to be ashamed to be you. And I can do that, through, medically, and help, girls work on their strength and flexibility safely, and not in ways of, okay, we're just going to try to break your feet or, things like that. So that's really my main goal. And, just continue with, being an official for gymnastics, just so, girls can see that this is also an opportunity. Even if you don't want to, you don't want to perform later, you can still stay in the sport. You can still be a part of it in different ways and be, represented well and have a positive impact, when it's their time, when it's, they're older and, they want to help the younger generation. So that's really what I think my future holds. So.
Thank you. Busty?
Yeah, I've had some time to really consider these options. And also just like, it's just, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I just really believe the arts has the capacity to change culture. Like we actually can do it. And that means, we can mobilize and we can change the laws and we can, these amazing letters of demand that are going out. Like, I'm just like, this is happening now and we can tell our stories. Like, just thinking about Sarah Baartman as well, like she's from some of the same kin group that I'm from, and I think about her every time I go on stage, because I go, this woman who had this experience has allowed me to be on this stage, to make a choice to be on this stage. At times she did not have a choice, so I feel like the future is here. It's now. We've made it happen. Like, we've already changed the world as artists just by being in a time that where we've had to reassess how we roll, like, what we do and how we do it. So I think anything is now possible on that. Although, want to make a show called The Hot Brown Honey Revolution, which will just encompass everybody. Every beautiful Black and brown human from around the world.
Well, you got two candidates right here, right next to you.
Straight up, I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Professor Vanessa, what are your plans for the future and your work and research in Blacks in the circus in the UK? You gotta unmute yourself.
I think I want my work just to carry. I mean, I am a producer as well. I do lots of events and festivals and directions for my work at the University of Sheffield. I think what I want to think about, one of the most astonishing things that I did 2 years ago when I worked with a young group of women of colour, different backgrounds in different ways, obviously different socioeconomic backgrounds as well. That's another issue for a lot of young women performers as well. I found one of the things that was really fascinating with them, they really challenged me about my position of white privilege. They've really challenged me about what I was looking at. They showed me to learn interpretation, but I gave them one fact, which I think you want to think about as well, all of you as a group. In the 19th century, there was over 55 performers of colour in top circuses throughout Europe and UK. Can you say that today? And my role is to say, this is not just political correctness. This is not just something that's a modern phenomenon. This is a history that you've forgotten about. This is a history that's been wiped out, whitewashed, and it's a history of performance that has its roots in Black culture in many ways. And we need to make sure that it's central again to the history of performance, and that everyone has the opportunity to learn it and be part of it. So do that. Sorry about my clock. I with my history and the way I'm uncovering stuff, and I hope everybody will want to use it and learn from it and have it, because it's something that I feel very passionate about.
Thank you, Professor Vanessa. Joanna Diaz.
Yeah, I'm in the process of creating my first solo show, so that's quite exciting. And I've been co-produced by Upswing, so Vicky Amadome in UK is working with me. She's a blessing, thank you.
An amazing performer and woman, and amazing. She's a very good friend, amazing performer.
I know. So that's, I mean, maybe one of the first steps is this talk in the right direction. It took me one day to accept because I was afraid. Because I've been afraid for a very long time. So another step is to make this show which tells about my story, tells about the year that I was born, and about my trauma and about love, really. And I will start with that, but I think what is important for me is to empower new generations, but is to tell myself that I can do this. So telling myself I go on stage and I can impact that love that I put on stage, I can impact to others. So that's I think that's the step in the right direction. I think I need to educate myself even more about these subjects, about semantics, about how to act, how to stand up when someone is really racist. You know, I've been like just hiding and trying to not make a scene, not, you know, like trying to not draw attention to myself. So I want to do that and join organizations that have actions, clear actions to do that in our sector, to give the example for our society for inclusion.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Joanna Highgood.
No, I'm writing notes going, what do I want? I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that I'm older now and think priorities have really changed. Like, I mean, I know that I want to continue to work for equity and justice and joy and peace for our people, you know, and for all people and creatures on the planet. I think that's really important. I want to keep dreaming big creatively and manifesting those dreams in however I can. I just want to have adventures. You know, this experience is that long, you know, and so I want to make sure that, one, that I can contribute in some way, and this art is the way that I know that I can do that. And I agree with Busty that I really feel that we have this incredible capacity to support people and seeing new perspectives and understanding our situations or the situations that we inhabit, and to help heal people. So I feel like that's also important. But I also want to just, you know, like expand into this extraordinary experience that we have with life, and to try to move from an unencumbered place, like understand these are our challenges, and, you know, go work through that from a place that is through expansion and opening as opposed to contracting. So I don't know how to completely do that yet. And you would think that once you hit your 60s, you're like getting it, but you don't. But I think that's my journey ahead. I think and I want to support young people. I'm so proud of young people right now. I mean, I'm so proud. I'm so moved by the energy, the way that they can articulate, the way that they can mobilize and take action. And I want to support that in every possible way that I can. So.
Thank you, Joanna. And Shanae, stiletto.
Thank you, Veronica. Well, I want to continue also to as Joanna said, as expand as an artist, and to remind people that, you know, I've never allowed the judgments and the racism to stop me from doing everything I want to do as a performer. I've created my acts, I've created my art, I've done anything that I wanted to do, despite what people have said, despite them maybe not wanting to hire me, despite them wanting to change it once they've received it and mold it into their version of what they think is better than what I've created. And so I want to remind, you know, people that are listening about that. Like, even though we've gone through all these experiences, that has not stopped us from pushing forward, recreating our acts, creating special things that we want to do from our own perspective, putting that art out there into the world. Obviously, to maintain these careers that we've all had for so many decades. And now going into my second decade. I've almost been a circus performer now, nearing to 20 years. And, I want to have other opportunities. I want to artistically direct. I want to expand as an artist. I want to go into directing. I want to get those opportunities that we see are not usually given or offered to us, because when I see my white counterparts being offered these roles to expand their circus careers and so they don't age out, which is also becoming a new issue with ageism. I'm experiencing that now. I've been experiencing that for just the past couple of years, seeing that people don't even want us over a certain age to be in these spaces. So not only are you not the right look, now you're not the right age. And we know that we get that on so many different levels, being Black women and being circus artists in general, being women, and then getting to a certain age that they don't apply that to men. They can perform for as long as they want. They can expand and do many different roles. And yes, we do also see a lot of women doing that as well, but we know that that's not afforded to us in the same way that it's afforded to our male counterparts. So I want to also too, I want the youth of circus to have it way better than I did. I want every single generation, just like in acrobatic gymnastics, I don't want them to have the same experiences that I do. I don't want little girls and boys to be sexually abused in acrobatics by their coaches or in gymnastics. I don't want circus performers to be called, like I have been in many contracts, a black bitch by fellow circus performers. I don't want them to walk into these spaces where they are consistently insulted and placated for who they are and demeaned and dehumanized day in and day out while they're trying to make it to the stage, while they're trying to give their heart and soul to the stage, just like their white counterparts are. But they can't, because they're dealing with all those microaggressions, or being told, like I was, that maybe I had extenuating mental issues that made it so that I wasn't up to the job in Veronica, in Cirque du Soleil. I was told that by the touring manager. So even when they are treating you so bad, they don't want to be responsible for that horrific treatment. For, everybody that was there said, don't they realize that your emotional distress is coming from the way that they have treated you throughout this entire situation and circumstance? So I want it to be better for everyone. I want to continue to evolve and connect with more performers and more directors and more business owners of color, because we don't see each other, because we're usually cast off into different spaces. I know there's a lot of amazing people of color within this business, Black performers, Black, show owners. There are so many, and there's so many people that I don't get to meet and I have not met, and I have not gotten opportunities to work with. And I would love to do more collaborations. I feel like, it's both to hold both. We need to expand on our own, honestly, and then we also need to find better ways to force them to integrate us, because we deserve to be in those spaces. We've all been still showing up in those spaces, even though we're not welcome, and we've been doing well, and people love our work. I always remind people have told me that they love my work for like almost 20 years. So it's not like, we're going around people like not liking what we do. So to be able to get that representation, there should Black people and people of color in this artistic space that are legends, because you don't hear that for us. When you think about legends with Circus and Cirque du Soleil, do you think Black? No, you don't. Do you think performer of color? No, you don't. I could give you so many names even right now. The only person that I know that's legendary was in Cirque du Soleil, and she is a person of color. She's Black. Her name is Stella Ume, and she was in Veronica, and she's phenomenal. And that's just like the one name. Most people don't maybe know Stella's name, but I want people to hear about. I want there to be circus legends in the future that are artists and performers of color, whether or not that includes me. It's not about me. It's about, obviously, it's my individual experience and expression as an artist, as a lover of this art form. I've always loved the arts. I've always loved circus. I've always wanted to be a part of this. I love being an acrobat. I've never been anything else. But to be here and to imbibe in this space as a collective, for all of us, we need to be risen to a level of equity, of respect, of honorability. We deserve to be in those spaces. We don't deserve to just be included. We deserve to be treated beautifully, honorably, lovingly, compassionately, and with our human rights taken into account within every single experience, contract, interaction, and role that we have within any kind of circus arts company, any kind of theater arts company, ballet space, anything, dance, all of it, all of the arts. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that hopefully within my lifetime. And I'm very inspired by this conversation. I'm very grateful to be here. I never thought that I would see this. I never thought that this would ever happen, or that I'd be able to speak on these issues that, we deal with every single day, trying to keep keep a freelance circus career going, because it is so hard. It's so difficult. It's difficult when you're not Black, when you're not a person of color. So add all of that on top of that. It is a very difficult thing to do. And I am always in awe of the strength and the bravery of all performers of color that continue to stay in the game day in and day out, and won't even take no for an answer, and put out beautifully inspiring work. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shanae Stiletto. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. I know that this was a lot to unpack. I know that maybe some of these stories seem a little bit too unreal to be true, but they are. And they are the stories and the legacies of people, past experiences, our ancestors that we carry with us as women of color. I hope to continue this dialogue with everyone later. I hope that we can continue this conversation in different spaces, face to face, rather than online and through the computer screen. Excuse me, I'm very emotional right now. As Shanae just mentioned, this is the first time that I'm experiencing a conversation like this. I'm sure it's the first time for you too. I would like to thank everyone that joined us on the panel today. Miss Busty Beatz, thank you for joining us from Australia. Professor Vanessa, thank you very much for providing us with history that we now need to go and look after and research. Joanna Highgood, thank you for your wisdom. Joanna Diaz, thank you for your spark and your joy. Dr. Johnson, thank you for your experience and your expertise. And Shanae Stiletto, thank you for being that fire that we all have in us, that fire that has enabled us to persist and to stay in this industry and remain in this industry. I would like to thank CircusTalk for allowing us to have this platform, for giving us this space to communicate our experiences, our ideas to the world. And if you didn't know, and if you haven't realized by now, CircusTalk is an inclusive, independent, and international online network for the circus community. I have to read now because I'm very emotional. CircusTalk's mission is to create a level playing field for this industry and to democratize access to information. From me, from your moderator, I hope that you take this information and use it to not only educate yourself, but examine your own implicit bias, your own individual bias, and your idea of what you see when you see us. This is the way that we can really have real change. This is the way that we can really see ourselves uniting as a community. This is the future of circus. We are the future of circus. And just keep us in mind. Keep everyone in mind. That's all for now. And I'm gonna go with that.
Thank you, Veronica, for organizing.
Thank you. I just
thank you.
Thank you so much, Veronica.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So much.
Thank you.
I want to try to
Thank you.
outro one more time. Okay. All right. Sorry for that. I got really choked up. But let's continue the conversation. It's just getting started. I've been your moderator, Veronica Blair. This has been CircusTalk's Wake Up Call for Inclusion. We'll see you next time. Bye.